Chapter 16. Carlisle. He led me back to the room that he pointed out as Carlisle's office. He paused outside the door for an instant. "Come in," Carlisle's voice invited. Edward opened the door to a high-ceilinged room with tall west-facing windows. The walls were paneled again, in a darker wood where they were visible. Most of the wall space was taken up by towering bookshelves that reached high above my head and held more books than I ever seen outside of a library. Carlisle sat behind a huge mahogany desk in a leather chair. He was just placing a bookmark on the pages of the thick volume he held. The room was how I always imagined a college dean's would look, only Carlisle looked too young to fit the part. "What can I do for you?" he asked us pleasantly, rising from his seat. "I wanted to show Bella some of our history," Edward said. "Well, your history, actually." "We didn't mean to disturb you," I apologized. "Not at all. Where are you going to start?" "The Wagoner," Edward replied, placing one hand lightly on my shoulder and spinning me around and looked back toward the door we just come through. Every time he touched me, in even the most casual way, my heart had an audible reaction. It was more embarrassing with Carlisle there. The wall we faced now was different than the others. Instead of bookshelves, this wall was crowded with framed pictures of all sizes, some in vibrant colors, others dull monochromes. I searched for some logic, some binding motif that the collection had in common, but I found nothing in my hasty examination. Edward pulled me toward the far left side, standing me in front of a small oil painting in a plain wooden frame. This one did not stand out among the bigger and brighter pieces. Painting in varying tones of sepia, it depicted a miniature city full of deeply standing roofs within spires across a few scattered towers. A wide river filled the foreground, crossed by a bridge covered with sudras that looked like tiny cathedrals. "London in the 1650s, Edward said. "The London of my youth," Carlisle added, from a few feet behind us. I flinched. I hadn't heard him approach. Edward squeezed my hand. "Will you tell the story?" Edward asked. I twisted a little to see Carlisle's reaction. He met my glance and smiled. "I would," he replied, "but I'm actually running a bit late. The hospital called this morning. Dr. Snow is taking a sick day. Besides, you know the stories as well as I do," he added, grinning at Edward now. It was a strange combination to absorb. The everyday concerns of the town doctor stuck in the middle of a discussion of his early days in 17th century London. It was also unsettling to know that he spoke aloud only for my benefit. After another warm smile from me, Carlisle left the room. I stared at the little picture of Carlisle's hometown for a long moment. "What happened then?" I finally asked, staring up at Edward, who was watching me. "When he realized what had happened to him." He glanced back to the painting, and I looked to see which etching caught his interest now. It was a larger landscape in dull fall colors, an empty shadowed meadow in the forest with a craggy peak in the distance. "When he knew what he had become," Edward said quietly, "he rebelled against it. He tried to destroy himself, but that's not easily done." "How?" I didn't mean to say it out loud, but the word broke through my shock. "He jumped from great heights," Edward told me, his voice impassive. "He tried to drown himself in the ocean, but he was young to the new life and very strong. It was amazing that he was able to resist feeding while he was still so new. The instinct is more powerful then. It takes over everything. But he was so repelled by himself that he had the strength to try to kill himself with starvation." "Is that possible?" My voice was faint. "No. There are very few ways that we can be killed." I opened my mouth to ask, but he spoke before I could. "So he grew very hungry and eventually weak. He strayed as far as he could from the human populace, recognizing that his willpower was weakening too. For months he wandered by night, seeking the loneliest places, loathing himself. One night, a herd of deer passed his hiding place. He was so wild with thirst that he attacked without a thought. His strength returned, and he knew there was an alternative to being the vile monster he feared. Had he not eaten venison in his former life? Over the next month his new philosophy was born. He could exist without being a demon. He found himself again. He began to make better use of his time. He had always been intelligent, eager to learn. Now he had unlimited time before him. He studied by night, planned by day. He swam to France and he swam to France? People swim the channel all the time, Bella, he reminded me patiently. That's true, I guess. It just sounded funny in that context. Go on. Swimming is easy for us. Everything is easy for you, I griped. He waited, his expression amused. I won't interrupt again, I promise. He chuckled darkly and finished his sentence. Because technically, we don't need to breathe. You... No, you promised, he said, putting his cold finger to my lips. Do you want to hear the story or not? You can't spring something like that on me and expect me not to say anything, I mumbled against his finger. He lifted his hand, moving it to rest against my neck. The speed of my heart reacted to that, but I persisted. You don't have to breathe, he demanded. No, it's not necessary. Just a habit, he shrugged. How long can you go without breathing? Indefinitely, I suppose. I don't know. It gets a bit uncomfortable, being without a sense of smell. A bit uncomfortable, I echoed. I wasn't paying attention to my own expression, but something in it made him grow somber. His hand dropped to his side and he stood very still, his eyes intent on my face. Silence lengthened. His features were immobile as stone. What is it? I whispered, touching his frozen face. His face softened under my hand and he sighed. I keep waiting for it to happen. For what to happen? I know that at some point, something I tell you or something you see is going to be too much. And then you'll run away from me, screaming as you go. He smiled half a smile, but his eyes were serious. I won't stop you. I want this to happen because I want you to be safe. And yet, I want to be with you. The two desires are impossible to reconcile. He trailed off, staring at my face, waiting. I'm not running anywhere, I promised. We'll see, he said, smiling again. I frowned at him. So go on. Carla was swimming to France. He paused, getting back into his story. Reflexively, his eyes flickered to another picture, the most colorful of them all, the most ornately framed, and the largest. It was twice as long as the door I hung next to. The canvas overflowed with bright figures of swirling roads, writhing around long pillars and off marble balconies. I couldn't tell if it represented Greek mythology, or if the characters floating in the clouds of blood were meant to be biblical. Carlo swam to France and continued on to Europe to the universities there. By night he studied music, science, medicine, and found his calling, his penance in that, in saving human lives. His expression became awed, almost reverent. I can't adequately describe the struggle. It took Carlo 2 centuries of torturous efforts to protect his self-control. Now he is all but immune to the sin of human blood, and he is able to do the work he loves without agony. He finds a great deal of peace there at the hospital. Edward stared off into space for a long moment. Suddenly he seemed to recall his purpose. He tapped his finger along the huge painting in front of us. He was studying in Italy when he discovered the others there.